Laura Ingram's next. Laura.
Thanks, Sean. Thanks, Sean. And welcome to Washington. This is the Ingraham Angle. And we begin tonight with a continuing angle. Last night, we were the first and only primetime show to bring you the outrageous story about a largely unknown congressional slush fund. One that, as Sean just referenced, has paid out about $15.2 million in taxpayer money to victims of sexual harassment and misconduct perpetrated by members of Congress. You'd be shocked to know that some current members aren't even aware that the fund exists.
Do you support this shush fund, as it's being called?
No, I had, and frankly, I had no idea that it existed. I'm like you. This seems like
wait. You didn't know this
concern.
fund existed, Congressman Jordan?
No, I didn't. I didn't know that was how it worked. Just did not know.
Last night, we played for you some of the explosive testimony of Representatives Jackie Speier and Barbara Comstock, Democrat and Republican. They maintain, among other things, that they know for a fact that there are current members who have engaged in sexually inappropriate behavior. So my question tonight is this: why aren't they naming names? Why aren't others naming names? And I'm not the only one asking these questions and demanding real answers.
I think it's good to get this stuff out and name them. Just get it out and lay it out and change the rules so that people feel like they can come to work without being harassed. And so those who do these things need to be held accountable.
You want to know who they are?
Sure.
Oh, yeah, he's right, of course. And yes, it is good that congresswomen are speaking out about this, and some congressmen. But the refusal to identify the members accused of misconduct is, I think, in itself enabling. Now, aren't they kind of, in a sense, complicit in the cover-up? And I know it sounds harsh, but don't they have an obligation to reveal wrongdoing on the part of their colleagues? Especially if the misconduct is directed against young, vulnerable staffers. And doesn't leadership have something to say about this? By the way, we all have a right to know. They work for us. And we, the taxpayers, are footing the bill for this absurd shush fund. You're supposed to not talk about it. Well, we want to know the details of these settlements. We want the time, place, and manner of the misconduct. And I want the names of the members accused. It is totally unacceptable for Congress to operate under a different set of rules than everybody else. Whether it's the type of health care they vote to give themselves, or the amount of time off they get, or the way they get to use OPM, other people's money, to pay off settlements. The American people, I think in both parties, they want more transparency and accountability in government across the board. And I'm going to promise you this: I'm going to stay on this issue, and others like it. Ours is supposed to be government of the people, by the people, and for the people, not government of anonymous gropers. Joining us now with reaction is M. Reese Everson. She's a former staffer for the Congressional Black Caucus who accused a congressman of sexual misconduct. Reese, it is great to see you, and you're brave to come in, and we just really appreciate your voice here.
Thank you.
I know you want to make this about the general issue of sexual misconduct in Congress, because you were there, you were a fellow at the Congressional Black Caucus. Just briefly give us a rundown on what happened to you. You don't have to name the name, because I know for you it's traumatic, again, but tell me what happened.
Well, as I said, I've worked for the CBCF, and I, during that time, experienced harassment. And at that time, I didn't even know that it was harassment. I called it an inappropriate experience.
What were the comments? Or?
I experienced a conversation where a person basically offered me an opportunity to flirt with him in order to excel in my career. And that was the gateway for the harassment, me realizing, okay, I've got to get out of here. Because if I don't, then I only have one option, and that's to comply. And I don't want to participate in that, so I've got to just leave.
Well, when you say offered to flirt, like what? Give me a little more on that. I'm not following that.
So, Reese, are you going to be a good girl?
What does
yes.
that mean? Yeah, what does that mean?
Well, if you're going to be a good girl, what's the point in you being there?
Ah.
And I'm like, what? And so he said, well, are you going to flirt with me? And so it was at that moment I realized, okay, you've got to get out of here. because this is a situation that is only going to turn for the worst. And as a young woman, your instinct is fight, flight, or freeze. And my instinct was to run. And I tried to get away from the situation by moving to another office. And that was not successful. I was retaliated against, wrongfully terminated, and then blackballed. And so my experience was a very traumatic one where not only because of speaking up did I lose my job, but my ability to find another job. And I think that that's the worst part of all of this is the silence. It's a pervasive, incestuous silence that keeps women hidden and keeps women from speaking up because they don't have the courage to speak out against such a powerful person.
This was in 2013?
2013.
How long by the time you arrived for this fellowship, which is kind of cool to get? I mean, that's exciting when you get a job in Congress. You're a young woman and you're going in there and you're going to learn about how Congress works. And so how long by the time you arrived at Congress to the time this conversation with this congressman began?
I had been on the Hill for about 7 months.
7 months. And had you heard from other people on the Hill, other female staffers, that this had been a problem with other congressmen?
Yes.
Any word on this?
Yes. As a matter of fact, when you're applying for the different offices or when they're interviewing you to work in different offices, you'll hear whispers or women will say, okay, not that office because that one has a history. So there's a little system, a tweeting system, if you will, a chirping maybe, and warning other young ladies to kind of stay away from certain people.
But you hadn't heard anything about this particular congressman?
No.
And so you weren't able to go to this accountability office because you were a fellow and not a full-time employee?
Well, the thing is, they let anyone submit an application for a complaint. And so I did submit a formal complaint. However, I'm ineligible.
Crazy. I mean, I'm not even sure I don't really like a lot about that accountability office because it forces women or men complaining into counseling.
Mandatory.
Mandatory counseling. The person who needs counseling is the perpetrator. But so I don't even know if I like a lot of that, but if there's going to be protections in place, why the heck aren't they in place for interns and fellows? Why should you be treated any differently?
Absolutely. Those are the most vulnerable of the people on the Hill.
This is insane. So this happens, you moved offices, and when you were there, is it the same position, another fellowship?
Same position. And the office began to communicate, and so there's a conversation going on. Well, why did you leave?
Did you tell people?
I tried to explain, oh, well, I'm just looking for another, some other experience. But when you say that, the person I said that to, she said, well, why would you leave? They wanted to hire you full time. Are you an opportunist? Will you just leave us too? And I realized I have to tell this woman the truth because she's not going to give me the credibility that I deserve.
So did another woman rat you out on this? And then that it became known that you were complaining about the other, and then she must have told. So the girl power didn't really work in your favor.
Not in that instance. Sometimes there's gatekeepers.
So women who are enabling
absolutely
on Capitol Hill are protecting their
system.
Congressmen.
Absolutely. These women have had these jobs with these members for 15 and 20 years, and they like the job security.
I hope everybody across the country has just listened to this young woman, and this is outrageous.
Unfortunately.
Do you agree that the Congresswomen who are in positions of great authority should name names?
Well,
I'm talking about the victims. I'm talking about the members who did this.
I think there should be a reporting system where the Congress people, it's like knowing, if you're an attorney and you see another attorney drunk driving, you have an obligation to the bar to report this attorney driving drunk the wrong side down the highway. So as a member of Congress, I think you have an obligation, if you know that another member is harassing young women or young men in their office, that you report it.
You don't want to identify the congressman?
Not at all. No. There's a fear of retaliation, even present day.
I really appreciate you coming here, Reese. This has got to stop. This has got to stop. This is insanity. And this is government that we pay for that's supposed to represent our interests. And there's people on a power trip up there. I don't know if they were, I said this last night, it sounds uncharitable, but I don't know if they were like geeks in school and they couldn't get any girls. And so now they get like a pin on their lapel and they think, oh, I get all the chicks at my disposal. But that's got to end.
As the show that said, what is it, House of Cards, everything is about sex except for sex. Sex is about power. And so you have these people with this power, and they feel the ability to wield it over anyone that they see. It's kind of like Simba in The Lion King. You are the king over everything that you see in your kingdom. They feel that power over everything and everyone. And it's not fair for a young, beautiful woman to come in and for them not to have power over her.
Reese, thank you for telling this shocking, but I guess for a lot of people listening, it's probably not all that shocking given the low trust levels that Congress has right now. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And Roy Moore, this is another series of scandals. Roy Moore, the convenient GOP scapegoat, that's the topic of tonight's angle. When it comes to Roy Moore's Alabama Senate bid, it seems like everyone is running for the exits, and perhaps they should. Look, the accusations have piled up, and I understand no one running for office wants to be asked uncomfortable questions. Questions like, do you support Roy Moore with these allegations hanging over his head? Do you believe Roy Moore should even be seated? He's going to hurt the party, leaders say. So let's cut our losses now and put Jeff Sessions back in his old seat. It's going to be a midterm election disaster for the GOP. But the more I think of it, the more I hear all this, I kind of think the GOP is just trying to use the Moore allegations, use them to deflect attention and criticism from their own failures.
If these accusations are true, that there'd be no place for him in the Senate.
I hope that he steps down immediately. I mean, this is, I never thought he belonged in the Senate.
I am pleased to be able to see that the nation, though, is talking about moral issues and trying to hold leaders to a higher account.
Well, I guess, yes. Let's hope that happens. But Roy Moore's future is going to depend on the voters in Alabama. And the GOP's future is going to depend on their own legislative record, which, let's face it, is not too hot. It's not too hot with or without Moore. Check out this congressional approval rating. It's now at about 15%. Only 29% of all Americans have a positive view of the GOP. I mean, Donald Trump's looking really good compared to those numbers. And last time I checked, let's face it, it wasn't Moore who dropped the ball on Obamacare repeal. And he didn't take long periods of time off out of session while he had work to do. He didn't fail to support enforcement of immigration laws. Roy Moore didn't support those absurd multilateral trade agreements that hurt the American worker. He didn't cause Ron Johnson to come out against tax reform today. And we know this, Moore didn't set up a slush fund for congressional miscreants who were involved with sexual behavior. Now, that's immoral. Roy Moore will certainly hurt the GOP image in 2018. He could, if he's elected, and especially among some female voters. That'll hurt. But before the GOP makes him the scapegoat for all that ails the party, well, I think the GOP itself needs to do some self-reflection. What have Republicans done in the past to infuriate and alienate their own base? So much so that they actually pushed Luther Strange out of the equation. They decided to go with Roy Moore. And now what is the GOP going to do to try to build back its reputation? Well, here's the good news. No matter what people say about Republicans or the Moore sideshow, at least they don't have someone like this running around.
Impeach him! Impeach him! Impeach 45! Impeach 45!
Does she know that doesn't rhyme at all? That's not a rhyming chant. You see, GOP, it can always get worse. And that's the angle. Joining us now with reaction is Mark Thiessen, a Fox News contributor, and from L.A., Michael Reagan, a Newsmax contributor. Both of you, great to see you. All right, Thiessen, take it away.
What a way to be introduced. Thank you. Maxine Waters, thank you.
Oh, no, we're getting to you on Maxine, Mike. Thiessen, tee off on this. I mean, my point is this. Roy Moore is going to rise or fall based on what Alabama wants to do here. I mean, if McConnell, they jumped into this race. I think the establishment, if they had stayed out, either Luther would have won, maybe someone like Mo Brooks would have won. Who knows? I don't know what would have happened. But the idea that he's the biggest problem facing the GOP, they were at 15% 6 months ago, before the Moore thing.
Yeah, no, I agree 100% with what you said. And look, the people of Alabama wanted an outsider, and they ended up with a sex predator. And it's understandable if it's true. If it's true, it seems there's more and more women coming forward. It seems like it's pretty damning evidence. So yes. The people of Alabama are not to blame for this, but they're put in an untenable position, which is they don't want to elect a pro-abortion Democrat to the Senate, but they also don't want to elect a sex predator. What do? So we've got to find some way to solve this so that the American people of Alabama aren't put in that position. Donald Trump needs to call the Republican Party of the state of Alabama, call the governor, and do something to stop this election from happening this way. The governor can stop the election or delay the election, but they shouldn't be put in a position of having to choose between those two extremes.
Michael.
No, I agree. The governor needs to get called. The governor needs to put it off, give the people of Alabama a chance to really, if you will, digest all that is coming forward with them. But the reality is that the Moore issue and the Republican issue should be two different issues. The Republicans are in trouble because they can't get together in a phone booth. Moore's got problems because, in my opinion, I think he is a sex predator. And so there's the issue with Roy Moore. The people of Alabama have got to choose. Hopefully they choose wisely. But I will tell you, I'd rather have a pro-choice Democrat sitting in the Senate of the United States that's not a predator than a Republican predator sitting there just because we want to have the 52nd vote.
Let's talk about the lack of trust that the GOP voters have toward the GOP establishment or leadership. Yeah. Think about this. They so didn't trust what the GOP was doing that in this case of this Senate race, when Mitch McConnell got involved, they're like, Mitch McConnell's for Luther Strange? I don't care if Donald Trump's for Luther Strange. We're going with this Roy Moore guy. I mean, it says a lot about the level of distrust among the electorate, Michael and Mark, toward the GOP leadership, because Corker and McConnell, they all rushed in on this Alabama race. And I think a number of people have raised this point, but I think there's some truth to this. Had they not got involved, it might not have gone down this way. They might have had Big Luther in there, or Mo Brooks or someone else.
And would be cruising to victory if he was. But there's problems with Luther Strange. I understand why they didn't want him. But this didn't just happen organically. Steve Bannon fed the flames of this Moore race, and Steve Bannon is out there threatening to challenge all these Republican senators.
Yeah, I'm going to challenge you a little bit on that. I mean, look, Bannon. I think Bannon's about issues. Bannon cares about the issues that the Trump voters cared about: borders, the culture. He cares about the trade. He cares about making American workers whole again, better economically. And those voters do. Let me just finish. Those voters do vote in Alabama. And I think it's not about Roy Moore. Roy Moore for Bannon, I guess I'm not speaking for him, Bannon was the guy who was going to best uphold the Trump agenda.
Yeah.
So that's what Bannon's doing. But I think Mitch McConnell has a lot more to blame here than Steve Bannon.
But here's the problem that we have. Is that what Bannon is doing is organize, and I understand what the efforts are genuine, but he's organizing a circular firing squad. We're firing our targets at Republican senators who vote with Donald Trump 96% of the time. The reason we're not getting the Trump agenda passed is not because of Mitch McConnell. It's because we only have 52 Republican senators is not enough to pass the Trump agenda. So what we should be focused on is there are 5 Democrats in 2018 who are running in states that Donald Trump won by double digits. We need to get those people defeated and keep all the Republicans so we have 57 votes so we can say to Ron Johnson when he says, I'm not for the tax bill, see ya.
Absolutely correct with this. The fact of the matter is, we're going after Republicans instead of going after the Democrats. Bannon needs to be going after the Democrats and making sure the Republicans maintain the 52 majority or even bigger going into 2018.
Well,
but instead
Michael,
it is a circular firing squad.
But remember, Donald Trump was elected to drain the swamp. But there's a lot of swamp creatures up there on Capitol Hill, and they're trying to drown him. I mean, they're trying to empower Bob Mueller and have him more insulated from any accountability up there in the Senate. Those are Republicans doing that. So, I hear what you guys are saying. Hold on. I hear what you guys are saying. But the people revolted in November 2016, and they're bound to do anything, because if Mitch McConnell can't get Obamacare repeal out of that Senate, that's not Roy Moore's fault. But that's his fault, and the people are mad about that.
But the solution to that problem
is to get more
Republicans.
Conservatives.
Fair enough, but it's not to knock off Republicans; it's to knock off Democrats. There are not enough Republicans in the Senate, conservative Republicans, and said, look, I'm all for competitive primaries. That's why we got Marco Rubio, Pat Toomey, Mike Lee. That's not the problem. This is not the time. We are not in the wilderness.
If I could jump in.
We're not in the wilderness. We have the White House, we have the House and Senate. We need to get the Trump agenda through. We need more Republican
But we
votes.
have people like Jeff Flake and John McCain who do not want the Trump agenda through.
If I could have a moment, I could have gotten John McCain's vote. The President of the United States didn't get John McCain's vote because the way he treated him during the primaries, never said he was sorry, never brought him to the White House to apologize to him and ask him for his vote on Obamacare. The President of the United States should take fault for not getting the vote of the senator from Arizona. I could have gotten it. My father could have gotten it. You could have gotten it. This president, because he doesn't like to apologize, didn't get it, and that's on him.
So, Michael, John McCain's bruised ego and hurt feelings should basically screw over the entire Arizona electorate?
How long have we known him?
What are you talking about?
We know.
He's acting as a Democrat on almost every issue. Every issue right now, he's acting like a Democrat on every big issue. I mean, I don't know if it's because he's mad about Donald Trump. Get over it. He said the most brutal things about talk radio, about the Tea Party. He has been vicious toward the Tea Party.
So then the way you marginalize John McCain is by getting more Democrats defeated so we have more Republicans so we can say, John McCain, go vote however you want.
I agree with you on that. Let's get more Democrats defeated. Michael and Mark, it's great to see both of you. Thanks so much. And up next, he's broken news about the Uranium One deal and the Clinton Foundation, a myriad of controversies surrounding the Clintons. Peter Schweitzer is going to tell you what you aren't hearing. Do not go away. Welcome back. The Justice Department confirmed this week that Attorney General Jeff Sessions is considering appointing a special counsel to investigate several matters related to Hillary Clinton. One of those issues is the sale of Uranium One to a Russian-backed company back in 2010. Hillary Clinton's State Department signed off on the deal despite the fact that it gave Russia control of only 20% of U.S. uranium capacity. Critics allege that Hillary okayed the deal because of some hefty donations to the Clinton Foundation. The National Review's Andy McCarthy wrote today, Uranium One has never primarily been a national security controversy. It's a corruption controversy. Joining us now from Tallahassee, a man who knows more about this perhaps than anyone else. Peter Schweitzer is the president of the Government Accountability Institute and author of the huge bestseller, Clinton Cash. So, Peter, I've noticed this happening over the last 48 hours, especially. Number of people, some Republicans, some Democrats, and always the Clintons, of course. There's no there. This is just a fantasy cooked up in the mind of some guy who wrote a book called Clinton Cash, and it's grabbed onto by the conservative media. You know, pay no attention to the scandal behind the curtain.
Yeah, that's the standard line, Laura. The problem for that narrative is there's plenty of evidence. The Uranium One saga, most people are aware of this 2010 sale of Uranium One to the Russian government that was approved by the Obama administration. But the story really begins in 2005 when Bill Clinton and Hillary Clinton help this Canadian investor, Frank Juster, who's the founder of Uranium One, acquire these uranium assets in Kazakhstan, which is a massive producer of uranium. And what we have in very clear evidence is the video testimony of the Kazakh minister of Kazatomprom, which is the Kazakh Atomic Agency. What does he say in this video deposition? Mukhtar Zakashev, his name, says that they granted that concession to Frank Justra because Hillary Clinton, then a senator, blackmailed and threatened Kazakh officials, saying she would not cooperate with them getting U.S. money, that she would not meet with any Kazakh officials until the concession was granted. After that concession was granted by Kazakh officials, Frank Juster sent $30 million to the Clinton Foundation. So we already have the oral testimony by this Kazakh official. It's never been disputed. And by the way, Laura, in that testimony, he describes in detail how this deal went down. He talks about a Clinton Foundation employee named Tim Phillips who pressured him. When Tim Phillips was contacted and asked about this video, He did not respond. He changed his online resume, removing the reference to his employment through the Clinton Foundation. That's just one piece of evidence. So this is not a fantasy cooked up. This is something foreign government officials have talked about.
Why is Andy McCarthy saying this is just corruption? It has no national security implications. I mean, our viewers hear uranium, and they think nuclear power, and that's important, and nuclear other things. But Andy's like, it's not a national security question.
Well, I would respectfully disagree with Andy. I have enormous respect for him. What's happening is a lot of people think Uranium One was totally about the uranium in the United States. The United States is not a big uranium producer. The problem is that's not true. Uranium One was a company when the Russians bought it and still is a company today that has massive uranium deposits around the world, in Kazakhstan, in Australia. They have them in Africa. They have them in the United States. If you were to look simply at the uranium that they have in the United States, the 20%, you could say it's pretty small. It doesn't amount to a lot. The problem is that's a small sliver of the entire assets that Uranium One represents. And by the way, this is very important. Uranium One, when it was bought by the Russians in 2010, the money for that deal was publicly announced by Vladimir Putin himself, and that deal was authorized by Vladimir Putin himself. So certainly Vladimir Putin saw national security interests from Russia's standpoint in acquiring Uranium One.
So we're always looking for the Putin connection to elected officials. Did you ever look at a picture of Putin? Did you ever have a white Russian in a restaurant? I mean, ever go to the Russian tea room? Peter, I saw you at the Russian tea room once in New York. That's a huge scandal. Are you committed to this idea? I don't know if you've thought it through about the special prosecutor. I think there's actually a good argument to be made that you really don't need a special prosecutor, that I guess if we believed in the Justice Department that they would actually pursue possible crimes, intimidation of witnesses, bribery, all the things that we're hearing about when it comes to the Clintons and this stuff, you can get a great line prosecutor to do this with a great staff. But, you know, we got a lot of people, Jim Jordan, they want a special prosecutor, another special prosecutor to investigate this.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. Here's the problem. We know for a fact the FBI has in its possession another tape, an audio tape, that was basically recorded by this FBI informant that's going to be coming forward. I have not heard the tape, but I've heard about the tape from people at the FBI. And that audio tape apparently is Russian officials with this uranium company talking about making donations to the Clinton Foundation to gain favorable action. That tape was given to Department of Justice prosecutors, the FBI field office requesting the ability to wiretap and to survey the Clinton Foundation. The Obama Justice Department came back and said, no, not enough evidence. So, you know, my point with an independent counsel, Laura, is, look, this is so political. I think the way to deal with this is precisely in this manner. It's important. It's complex. It goes to the reason people think there's so much corruption in Washington, D.C., and the fact that there's a double standard. Some people are held into account and others are not. Yeah,
the law should apply to both parties. Individuals in both parties should be held to account. Peter, it's always great seeing you. Thank you so much. And when we return, it's been 6 weeks since Stephen Paddock committed the worst mass shooting in modern U.S. history, and yet there's still all these unresolved questions. We dig for answers in the Vegas shooting with Mark Furman and a Vegas police insider up next. Welcome back to the Ingraham Angle. Some breaking news tonight. 14 new lawsuits dropped today, stemming from the October 1st mass shooting in Las Vegas. It's now been 6 weeks since killer Stephen Paddock opened fire from that 32nd floor of the Mandalay Bay Hotel, of course, unleashing hell on a crowd enjoying a country music festival, killing 58. And the lawsuits claim that concert organizers, the hotel, and the manufacturers of the bump stock gun accessory all share blame for the incident. But there remain unanswered questions. What was the killer's motive? Why does the police timeline of the incident keep changing? Why were explosives in Paddock's car? And what was on the hard drive now missing from a computer found in Paddock's hotel room? And we're just getting started with the question. Joining us now for reaction is Mark Furman, a former LAPD detective, and in Las Vegas, Randy Sutton, former lieutenant in the Vegas Police Department. Great to see both of you. Let's start with you, Randy. First of all, I had a curious thought. Is there anything to the fact that the investigation task force designation has changed? It started as in the homicide task force, and now it's in a different task force related to an officer discharging his weapon. What's that all about?
This is a little bit odd. The homicide detail of the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department is the detail that would normally handle all homicides of any stripe. And they were, of course, initially assigned to this, just as they would normally be. If you look at this whole picture, we have a murder-suicide. It was a mass murder. They would be the normal investigative team that would do this. They have the experience, they have the know-how, they have the technology. But for some reason, allegedly there was an accidental discharge when the advance team, when the initial entry team went into the hotel room. And that is any type of use of force by law enforcement officers is handled by what's called the FIT team, the Force Investigative Team. Yeah. And this is a small unit that handles officer-involved shootings and major uses of force. For some reason, and I got to tell you, it's inexplicable to me and to the members of the homicide detail who are literally up in arms over it. The main thrust of the investigation was taken away from homicide.
So it seems like it's diminishing. Is it wrong to say, and Mark, you can chime in, it seems like it's almost taking the investigation down to a less important task force? Or am I misreading this? I don't want to state anything that's incorrect. But as an outsider, it seems curious, Mark.
I think you're correct. I think you're correct, Laura, and I think you're correct because the homicide investigators that were on the scene, and it's unfortunate that we haven't been able to hear from them in 6 weeks because they actually do this every single day. The sheriff, the FBI, assistant directors, ATF, they do not do these homicide investigations, and they weren't in the scene. So I would be up in arms if I was one of these homicide detectives also. This is their case. They should follow it all the way through. And if need be, investigate an accidental discharge, which would be really rather simple.
Here's a question I have. Where is the video of Stephen Paddock checking in on that VIP status he got at the hotel? If he brought in 15 bags over a period of time, 14 bags, doesn't anyone want to see that video? I want to see the video. I want to see him checking in, how they treated him. I want to know where that missing hard drive went. How does a hard drive jump out of a car? He shot himself, in the room. He shot himself in the room, but the hard drive disappeared at some point, I guess, after he shot himself. Who leaked the photos of the crime scene? And why were they leaked? When he fell backward, the tripod that he was shooting from, Mark, fell on his shin. That's kind of an odd. If you're shot, why does he falls back and it falls on his shin? Just some odd stuff. I'm sorry, but I'm always putting my sleuth hat on. Maybe I'm just a frustrated former detective. That's what I should have been. But where are these videos? I want to see the video. Is there an attempt for the hotel? Hotels need this business, and I like the Mandalay Bay. I always have. Well, they need this business.
Laura, I think in this case, there was a lot going on rather quickly, and there was a lot of people that had already been in the crime scene. Even though the suspect was dead, there was a lot of people in the crime scene before the detectives were able to actually get there. So there was probably a lot of things that were actually moved, accidentally or otherwise. There could have been things gone through, looked at, picked up. This is a kind of a semi-contamination of a scene. Yeah. But it's understandable under the conditions. But a hard drive going missing, that's a little odd. But sometimes when you have too many people, evidence is misplaced, lost.
No, I don't think that I don't think that evidence was misplaced in this set of circumstances. I believe that this individual, Paddock, who is I consider him the boogeyman because he doesn't make any sense as far as fitting any profiles. He literally came out of nowhere, did this incredibly heinous crime, and it appears to me that he created a set of circumstances where this would be in deep question forever.
Yeah, but Randy, but this is why we need the security guard to speak beyond the Ellen show. We need to have everybody. Everything has to come out here. It's the biggest shooting in U.S. history. And we have all these unanswered questions. I mean, I know it takes time, but come on.
I'm in complete agreement with you.
Crazy.
I believe that there is information that needs to be given to the American public who is watching this.
Who took that hard drive? Who took the hard drive? I find this whole thing to be it's just disturbing. If that's how they investigate a crime scene like this, that's disturbing. And I want to see the video of him checking in. I just want to see it all. We're almost out of time. Mark, really quickly.
Laura, when you look at the scene, I think the suspect, what he was attempting to do and what was in the crime scene does not match. There is an exaggeration by the suspect, and then his death quite possibly left his calling card.
Yeah, I appreciate it, both of you. Thank you so much. An important story for you straight ahead. Teen suicide rates on the rise. So is social media to blame? We've got new information for you on that coming up. Thanks for staying with us. There's a new study out that's warning of the possible deadly consequences for teens using social media. Teen suicide rates had been declining for decades, but new data from the Centers for Disease Control shows that the numbers went up between 2010 and 2015. Now, we don't know the exact reason for the uptick, but a new study in the Journal of Clinical Psychological Studies suggests it might have something to do with the sharp rise of the use of social media. Joining us now for reaction from Boston is psychotherapist Karen Ruskin, and in Grand Rapids, Michigan, pediatrician Meg Meeker. All right, Dr. Meeker, let's talk to you first. What have you seen in your clinical practice on this issue? Do you see a connection between social media and these types of, pathological or suicidal tendencies?
Yeah. Well, first of all, thanks for having me on, Laura. I'm so glad that you brought this up, and I do see a connection between teen depression and social media in my practice. As a matter of fact, today I just talked with a young girl who is struggling with very serious depression, and depression in teenagers is very serious. How can it be related to social media? Depression in a teen is all about the self hating the self. Deep down subconsciously, teens don't like who they are. So we can see how being on social media, Instagram in particular, teenagers see other kids, they look at the picture of the other kid, girls in particular, and say, I'm not as thin, I'm not as pretty, I'm not as attractive as she is. And so they start to feel worse about who they are. So, I really see, and I've actually had teenagers tell me that being on Instagram makes them feel worse. And so for some of the teenagers that I treat with depression, I, with their cooperation, actually put them on a diet from social media to guard them, if you will, from feeling worse than they already do. So for me personally, I see a very clear connection between social media and teen depression.
Dr. Ruskin, I have a daughter who's 12, and she said, when are you going to get a phone? And I say, how does never sound to you? I'm literally going to do everything I can. I borrow a friend's phone, but I'm petrified of this. And I guess I'm the boring mother, and I'm petrified of it. And maybe I'm wrong to be petrified of it, but I find what I see among kids, it's not good. It's not good.
You're not wrong, Laura. And the fact is, as parents, as a parent myself of a teenager and as a psychotherapist, it's imperative that we create ground rules for social media. For an example, the phone at night must not be in the room. That's the bottom line. We're still parents, and we forget that sometimes. When it comes to kids and social media, the consistent and frequency of looking at social media instead of living your life, that can lead to depression. Not being able to escape from the world, the bedlam of the everyday hustle bustle of socialization, home used to be a safe haven. It's not anymore because the appendage known as social media, the phone, comes home with you everywhere. So as a parent, we must talk with them about their social media relationship. We must talk with them about health and wellness and suicide, and not be afraid to, because parents are often afraid to have those hard to talk about talks. And if you're afraid to talk about it, your kid's going to be afraid to talk about it.
All right, that's an excellent point. I want to play for you something that one of the original funders of Facebook, Sean Parker, said recently about its addicting quality. Let's watch.
That thought process was all about how do we consume as much of your time and conscious attention as possible. And that means that we need to sort of give you a little dopamine hit every once in a while. It's a social validation feedback loop that it's like it's exactly the kind of thing that a hacker like myself would come up with, because you're exploiting a vulnerability in human psychology.
All right, quick reaction from both of you. Dr. Meeker, Sean Parker, he knows technology. What's your thought?
He does. And you know, it's very dangerous and very addictive. And I want to say something. First of all, never parent out of fear. Parents are so afraid to pull social media out of their kids' lives, to make their kids put the phone in the kitchen plugged in at nighttime. So afraid to tell their kids, look, half an hour of social media a day is all you get. But let me tell you something. Your kids are worth fighting for. My kids are adults now, and I was very strict with screen time, which was TV in those days, and they are so grateful. If you can be strong enough to parent well and say to your kids, look, these are my rules, my phone, no privacy, we need to restrict social media, you will be doing your kids such an enormous favor. So don't be afraid. Do what's right for your kids.
Dr. Ruskin, very quickly to close this out, Sean Parker says it's exploiting a vulnerability in human psychology.
Mm-hmm. Human beings, by our very nature, we are addictive, we are impulsive, we are reactive. So definitely there is a lure in for social media. As parents, it's all about helping kids to create a healthy balance. Because social media has its advantages, it's just about having a healthy balance. Extremism in any direction is unhealthy. We must control our controllables.
All right, guys, great to see you. The doctors were in, thank you. And coming up, Joe Biden in 2020? We've got a message about that next.
What started